for today. Our presentation is Signifying the Unseen, how fiction and speculation reframe information design. Next slide, please. So let's begin by grounding ourselves in what information design traditionally means. Edward Taft, in 1983, defined it as the art and science of preparing information so that people can use it with efficiency and effectiveness. And a later, more user-centered definition given by Ginny Redis describes it as determining the needs of users and creating materials to help them find, understand, and use information. In both cases, clarity, usability, and legibility are central to these definitions. But we are wondering, is clarity always neutral or even always desirable? Next slide. So here we begin to challenge in our research the assumption that clarity is inherently good. And we are questioning, what if clarity silences some truths? And what if the most honest information is the one that makes you uncomfortable? Or what happens when data stops explaining and starts provoking? So next, traditional information design, as we've seen, values clarity, simplicity, and trust. And its visual language is often sleek, legible, and seemingly objective. And we are all familiar with examples like subway maps, scientific infographics, or government dashboards. But this aesthetic of neutrality can obscure some important underlying dynamics. So what might lie beneath the surface of this neutral information? Often, it conceals assumptions about what matters, about who matters, and about how the world is structured. And there are always exclusions, simplifications, and some power dynamics that are shaping what information is shown and what isn't. So next, please. And let's look at some examples about this issue. And take some underground maps, for example. They are clean, they are color-coded, their color-coded layout feels neutral, and even they are elegant. But maybe they distort the geography. They can obscure some social realities like neighborhood wealth, accessibility, or who gets served by the system. And another example is the infographics in news media. They claim objectivity through charts, but they frame some choices there, like scales, omissions, or even visual metaphors, and they can push an ideological agenda, maybe. Next, please. Another example is COVID dashboards that show some real-time infection numbers. We all have seen some of these infographics. They often ignored some mental health issues, long COVID, or inequalities in healthcare access, maybe. And another example is global development index maps that behind these tidy rankings, they like some colonial legacies, maybe Western norms, or metrics that erase alternative ways of flourishing. These cases, they also show information design always carries embedded worldviews, whether acknowledged or not. Next slide. And all these are brings us to speculative design, speculation. Because speculative design, as it is described by Hume and Raby, designers, speculative design isn't about problem solving. It's about question asking. Speculative design imagines alternative futures and invites reflection. And historically, the word speculate meant to observe attentively. Only later did it take on the connotation of conjecture. So in design, when we say speculation, we reclaim its older meaning. speculation as critical reflection and world building. And next slide, the meaning of friction is very central here in speculative design. Some researchers have already described, like Forlano and Matthew, design friction as the tension between fictional scenarios and practical realities. And the friction here, it isn't a flaw, it is a feature of speculation. Friction reveals hidden values, exposes disagreements between designers and researchers, and opens up space for further questioning. So in the studies of Laura Forlano and Matthew, moments of disagreement weren't setbacks. They were generative points of reevaluation and reflection. Next slide, please. So in 2021, Peirce identified 5 types of frictional design. Divergent friction, which opens rather than closes options. Oppositional friction, which challenges dominant narratives. Accelerational friction, which exaggerates trends to highlight risks. Counterfactual friction, which presents what-if alternatives. And analogical friction, which uses metaphors to rethink systems. Each of these types of frictional design introduces resistance, not to derail design, but to expand it. Next, please. Donna Haraway in 2016 gives us a broader and philosophical sense of friction. For her, staying with the trouble means resisting easy narratives. It means embracing complexity, contradiction, and tension as fertile ground for thought. So friction for her is a tool because it disrupts, and in doing so, it invites new understandings and relationships. So for us here in our research, friction becomes frictional thinking becomes a design strategy, because we have friction and then disruptive thinking and then reflection and then the creation of new futures. Next slide. So, why bring speculation into information design? We think it is important because sometimes presented information isn't enough. We need to provoke, to surface unseen dimensions, and to allow space for alternative epistemologies and ways of knowing the world that go beyond the dominant frame. Speculative design does this thing. It unsettles all the assumption and asks, what else could this be for? Next slide, please. So to design the unseen, information design, is to invite friction and speculation into familiar forms for us as designers. And here you can see 2 visual metaphors that we have thought. On the left, you can see a closed circle, and we use it as a metaphor for convergent design thinking, which is focused and smooth and finalized. And on the right, we imagine speculative and frictional design thinking as an open, layered form that represents speculative and frictional thinking as ambiguous, dynamic, and plural. So information becomes not just clear, but alive with possibilities. Next slide. So convergent thinking in information design feels, as we have already told, smooth for a reason, because it narrows focus, it operates with clear constraints, and it removes ambiguity. And this helps when we're moving toward implementation, but it risks overlooking complexity or silencing some alternatives, which are very important. And next, convergent thinking also is closed. It's also closed. It selects, it discards, and finalizes. And we can see that it prioritizes deliverables. It gives a solution, a clear solution, but often this is at the cost of other possible ones. So why speculative approaches matter? Because they keep the space open, especially in early design phases. So next slide. And speculative and frictional design is for us open because it holds space for multiple futures rather than narrowing to one future. It is also layered in the way that we see it because it explores ethical and social or sensory dimensions simultaneously. And also it is plural because it values multiple truths and voices and ontologies. So it's designed as dialogue, not just delivery. Next slide. So what does this mean for information design practice? It means that designers become storytellers of possibility. Information here becomes a medium not only for clarity, but for empathy, for critique, and even imagination, which is very important. And we don't have it always. So we don't just present reality in information design. The goal is to co-create some futures, alternative futures. Next slide. And to conclude with our presentation, when we introduce friction and speculation into information design, we want to shift from describing the world as it is to imagining what it could be. So through speculation, we give information a future. Through friction, we try to give it some depth in design process. And together, we think that they can transform design into a question, one that never stops asking. Thanks a lot. That's all for me.